When people speak about the ancient Maya, they are not describing one single tribe or one single city, but a long-lived civilization spread across a broad region of Mesoamerica, including the southern lowlands of present-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and parts of Honduras and El Salvador. Over many centuries, Maya communities adapted to different landscapes of dense rainforest, limestone hills, seasonally dry plains, and coastal zones. In some places, the land seems almost silent at first glance, yet it once supported busy cities, markets, royal courts, and ceremonial centers that echoed with footsteps, drumbeats, and the quiet work of farmers tending maize, beans, and squash. The Maya world was never frozen in time. It changed constantly, with kingdoms rising and falling, alliances forming and dissolving, and local traditions blending with wider cultural patterns. Even today, millions of Maya people still live in the region, speaking Maya languages and preserving traditions that connect the present with the deep past. One of the most remarkable things about the ancient Maya is that they developed an extraordinary system of writing. Their script was made of glyphs, some representing whole words and others representing syllables, and it was among the most sophisticated writing systems in the pre-Columbian Americas. Scribes carved it into stone stele, painted it on pottery, and wrote it in bark paper books called codices. For a long time, scholars could not fully read it, and the script seemed almost like a sleeping language waiting for the right key. Gradually, through patient study and the comparison of inscriptions, many glyphs were deciphered, revealing names of rulers, dates of battles, rituals, and family histories. The writing could be elegant and compact, with signs arranged in balanced blocks that seem almost decorative, yet they carried detailed records of politics and belief. In a quiet room, the inscriptions can feel intimate, as though voices from centuries ago are still speaking in a measured tone. The Maya were also brilliant observers of time and the sky. They developed several calendars, each used for different purposes, and some of them were tracked with great precision over long periods. One calendar, known as the Tzolk'in, cycled through 260 days, while another, the Harb, followed a 365-day solar year. These could be combined in a larger calendar round, creating repeating patterns of days. For longer historical counting, the Maya used the long count, which allowed them to record dates far into the past and future. Their calculations were not merely practical. They were deeply woven into ritual life, political legitimacy, and the ordering of the universe. Maya astronomers watched the movements of the sun, moon, Venus, and other celestial bodies with close attention, often building structures aligned to solstices, equinoxes, and important planetary cycles. The sky for the Maya was not distant. It was active, rhythmic, and present like a vast slow clock above the temples and forest canopy. A central part of Maya life was maize, and it shaped both daily survival and sacred imagination. Corn was more than a crop, it was a foundation of identity. Farmers cleared plots in the forest, worked the soil with careful knowledge of seasons and rainfall, and relied on a deep understanding of local ecology. Maize, beans, squash, chilies, cacao, and other plants formed a balanced agricultural system that sustained large populations in many areas. In myth and ritual, maize carried an even greater meaning. Some Maya creation stories describe humans as being fashioned from maize dough, which reflects how closely the plant was tied to the idea of life itself. In murals, pottery scenes, and carved imagery, maize gods and agricultural symbols appear again and again. At harvest time, the fields would have held a particular atmosphere. Humid air, the rustle of leaves, the smell of earth, and the sense that human labor and sacred order were joined together in the same slow cycle. The great Maya cities were often built with impressive stone architecture, yet they were not cities of metal wheels or beasts of burden, as in some other parts of the world. Instead, their monuments rose through the combined effort of many workers moving limestone blocks, plastering surfaces, and shaping public spaces. Temples, palaces, plazas, ball courts, and ritual platforms created urban landscapes that could feel both formal and alive. Cities such as Tikal, Palenque, Kapan, Calakmul, and Karakol became centers of power and ceremony. Their pyramids reached upward through the trees, sometimes emerging from mist in the morning like mountain silhouettes made by human hands. Many structures were coated with lime plaster and painted in bright colors that have faded over time. The stone ruins we see today are only the quiet remnants of places that were once vivid with banners, incense, painted stucco, and crowds gathered for performances and state rituals. Maya society was organized through a network of city-states rather than one unified empire. Each kingdom had its own ruler, noble families, local alliances, and ceremonial traditions, though some cities were far more powerful than others. Kings and queens acted as political leaders, military commanders, and religious mediators, often presenting themselves as intermediaries between the human world and the supernatural realm. Dynastic succession mattered greatly, and inscriptions carefully recorded royal lineages. Yet power was never simple or permanent. Cities competed for dominance, formed strategic marriages, captured enemies, and staged elaborate ceremonies to assert prestige. Sometimes one kingdom would exert influence over neighboring centers for a time, then later weaken or disappear from prominence. This shifting political landscape gives Maya history a dramatic, but also human quality. It was a world of ambition, loyalty, diplomacy, and uncertainty, with every court trying to keep its place in a changing balance. Religion among the ancient Maya was rich, layered, and deeply connected to place and time. The Maya believed in a cosmos structured by several levels of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld, each inhabited by powerful beings. Mountains, caves, springs, and cenotes were not just natural features, but sacred openings into other dimensions of existence. Rituals involved offerings, incense, bloodletting, prayer, dance, and occasionally more dramatic acts meant to maintain cosmic balance. Some ceremonies were public and political, while others may have been performed in more private settings by priests, nobles, or specialists. The gods and supernatural beings of the Maya world were not always fixed in simple categories. They could shift forms, combine attributes, and appear in different aspects depending on context. That flexibility gives Maya religion a mysterious, dreamlike quality. It suggests a world in which sacred power was moving, responsive, and present in the wind through the trees, the echo inside a chambered temple, and the flicker of torchlight on carved stone. The famous Maya ball game was another important part of public life, and it was far more than a sport in the modern sense. Played in special courts with stone markers and sloping walls, the game involved keeping a heavy rubber ball in motion, often using hips, thighs, or forearms rather than hands. Exact rules likely varied across time and place, and scholars still debate some aspects of how the game was played. What is clear is that it held ritual significance and could symbolize conflict, cosmic struggle, and political competition. In some artistic scenes, ball players are shown in ornate protective gear, while mythic narratives connect the game to creation stories and the movements of celestial bodies. The sound of a ball striking stone in a narrow court must have carried sharply through the air, followed by cheers, silence, or ceremony depending on the occasion. The game brought together athletic skill, symbolism, and high stakes in a way that made it central to elite culture. Art and craftsmanship were also highly developed in Maya civilization. Artists worked in stone, wood, shell, jade, plaster, clay, and painted pigment, creating objects that were both beautiful and meaningful. Jade was especially prized, valued for its green color and rarity, and it was shaped into ornaments, masks, ear spools, and ritual objects. Pottery could be plain and practical or richly painted with scenes of court life, mythology, and feasting. Some vessels show nobles seated in conversation, scribes painting fine glyphs, or deities emerging from sacred stories. The Maya favored elaborate visual communication, where images and text often work together. Even a small object could carry a great deal of symbolic weight. In modern museums, these works sometimes seem delicate, but in their original setting, they were part of living ceremonies, gifts, burials, and displays of status. Their colors and surfaces would have caught lamplight and sunlight in ways we can only partly imagine now. Trade connected the Maya world across long distances, allowing goods, ideas, and styles to move between regions. Coastal communities, river routes, and overland paths linked interior cities with the wider Mesoamerican network. Merchants carried cacao, salt, obsidian, jade, feathers, textiles, pottery, and other valuable items. Obsidian, a volcanic glass used for blades and tools, came from specific source areas and can still be traced by archaeologists today. Cacao was especially important, used in elite feasting and likely as a valued luxury beverage. Trade was not just about objects. It also carried diplomatic ties, religious ideas, artistic fashions, and perhaps even stories. A shell from the coast or a piece of obsidian from far away could arrive in a remote inland city and become part of a royal offering. The movement of goods across forests, wetlands, and stone causeways reveals a world that was closely connected, though the routes themselves were often difficult and slow, shaped by rivers, paddlers, porters, and seasons. Finally, the end of many classic Maya city centers remains one of the most studied and thoughtful mysteries in ancient history. Around the 9th century, many major cities in the southern lowlands experienced decline, population loss, and political collapse, though the process varied by region. It was not a single sudden disappearance, and it did not mean the Maya civilization ended. Some centers remained active, others shifted northward, and Maya communities continued in many places for centuries afterward. Scholars have proposed several contributing factors, including drought, warfare, environmental stress, changing trade networks, and political fragmentation. Most likely, several pressures worked together over time, making life harder for rulers and farmers alike. Temples may. The ancient Maya did not live in one single kingdom, but across many city-states, each with its own rulers, alliances, rivalries, and traditions. This means that when we speak of the Maya, we are really speaking about a broad civilization spread across the lowland forests of present-day Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, and southern Mexico. Some cities were powerful for a time and then declined, while others rose later in different regions. In this way, Maya history feels less like a straight line and more like a constellation, with bright centers appearing in different places and moments. Scholars can trace these changes through stone monuments, pottery styles, and the remains of palaces and roads, though many details are still debated. What is clear is that Maya life was deeply regional, and yet connected by shared language families, religious ideas, and elite culture. Even in cities separated by long distances, rulers could exchange gifts, marriages, and messages, creating a network of politics that stretched across the jungle canopy and open plains. The Maya also created one of the most remarkable writing systems in the ancient world. Their script was made up of complex signs that could represent whole words, syllables, and sounds, allowing scribes to record names, events, dates, and rituals with impressive precision. For many years, the script was only partly understood, and much of it seemed mysterious to modern researchers. Slowly, however, scholars have managed to decipher a large portion of it, revealing a world of royal births, military victories, ceremonial offerings, and dynastic history. These texts appear on stone stelae, painted ceramics, carved bone, and folded books made from bark paper. To read them is to hear the voices of ancient scribes speaking across centuries. Yet the script was not used by everyone. It was a specialized skill, likely maintained by trained elites who worked in courts and ceremonial centers, where knowledge itself carried power. Among the most evocative Maya objects are the stelae, tall carved stone monuments placed in plazas and sacred spaces. These monuments often show rulers in elaborate dress, standing in ceremonial poses or accompanied by hieroglyphic texts that describe important dates and achievements. The stone surfaces, once brightly painted, would have caught sunlight in the open courtyards, making them look vivid and alive. Some stele mark victories in war, while others commemorate calendar endings, royal accessions, or anniversaries tied to the gods. In many cities, they formed part of a cycle of renewal, reminding the community that time was moving through sacred patterns. The Maya were attentive to duration and recurrence, and the monuments helped anchor those ideas in public space. Even now, weathered and worn, they stand as quiet witnesses to the ambitions of kings and the ceremonial rhythms of ancient life. Maya rulers were not only political leaders, but also sacred figures, believed to mediate between the human world and the divine. Their authority depended on ritual performance, lineage, and the ability to communicate with ancestral powers. On carved monuments and painted vessels, rulers are often shown wearing jade, quetzal feathers, and ceremonial headdresses that signal both beauty and legitimacy. These displays were not merely decorative. They were statements about cosmic order, social rank, and the ruler's role in keeping the world balanced. A king might appear in scenes of bloodletting, prayer, or vision, each act reinforcing the idea that royal sacrifice sustained the community. While the details of every ritual are not always certain, the overall pattern is clear. Maya kingship was deeply theatrical, blending politics, religion, and spectacle in a single lived experience. Time itself was one of the Mayas' great intellectual achievements. They developed multiple calendar systems that worked together, including a ritual calendar of 260 days, a solar year of 365 days, and longer counts used to track vast stretches of history. This allowed them to place events within intricate cycles of meaning. Dates on monuments could be exact in a way that feels astonishing, noting not only a day but a place in the cosmic order. The long count calendar in particular gave the Maya a way to record time over centuries and to link present events with ancient beginnings. This was not just practical accounting. It reflected a worldview in which time was structured, alive, and sacred. Certain days were considered powerful or dangerous, and rulers often timed rituals to match auspicious moments. To the Maya, time was something one entered with care, almost as if walking through a landscape shaped by the movements of the heavens. The Maya were also skilled builders, and their cities were carefully arranged around plazas, temples, palaces, and ball courts. These spaces were often set into a landscape of limestone ridges, wetlands, or forest clearings, and they could rise dramatically above the surrounding terrain. Temple pyramids did not look like smooth mountains at the time we see them now in ruins. Many were coated in stucco and painted with bright colors, perhaps reds, blues, yellows, and greens that would have gleamed in the sun. Stairways led upward toward shrines and ritual chambers, creating a movement from the public world below to the sacred world above. Palaces contained courtyards, chambers, and administrative spaces where scribes, nobles, and attendants worked. The built environment was full of symbolism, but it was also practical, organizing daily life, ceremony, and governance into one carefully ordered urban scene. One of the most famous Maya institutions was the ball game, played in specially built courts that appear in many cities. The exact rules varied over time and place, and scholars still debate some aspects of how the game was played, but it was clearly more than simple sport. It carried political, ritual, and mythic significance. In the Popol Vuh, a sacred narrative from the Highland Maya, ball-playing heroes descend into the underworld and confront supernatural forces, suggesting that the game was linked to cosmic struggle and renewal. Court walls, carvings, and ceramic scenes show players wearing protective gear and moving in dramatic, disciplined ways. The sound of the ball, likely a heavy rubber object striking stone or player equipment, would have echoed through the courts with a deep, resonant thud. For spectators, the game may have been thrilling, tense, and meaningful, perhaps connected to diplomacy, sacrifice, or the display of elite skill. It brought together motion, myth, and community in a way that feels both human and ceremonial. Maya religion was rich with gods, spirits, ancestors, and sacred forces that shaped everyday life. The natural world itself was understood as animated and relational. Rain, maize, lightning, caves, mountains, and the sun all had spiritual significance. Many rituals were tied to agricultural cycles, especially the planting and harvesting of maize, which was not only a staple food but a central part of identity and creation myth. Offerings of incense, food, blood, and precious materials were made to maintain balance and to invite favor from powerful beings. Fires in ceremonial vessels would glow in the dark, and the smell of copal resin likely drifted through plazas and temple chambers. Yet Maya religion was not a single fixed system. It changed over time and differed from one region to another, with local deities, ancestor traditions, and courtly rituals blending together. What remains constant is the sense that the visible world was only part of a larger, layered reality. The Maya also had a highly developed knowledge of the sky. They observed the movements of the sun, moon, Venus, and other celestial patterns with great care, and these observations became part of their ritual and political systems. Venus, in particular, was often associated with warfare, transition, and danger, though meanings could shift across texts and periods. The rising and setting of celestial bodies helped structure ceremonies and calendar calculations. Some buildings may have been aligned with solar events like solstices or equinoxes, though the interpretation of alignments is sometimes complex and not always certain. Still, it is evident that architecture, astronomy, and religion were closely linked. The night sky was not merely something to look at. It was a kind of sacred book, one written in light and motion, read by priests and scholars who understood that the heavens could signal when to plant, when to travel, and when to begin important rites. Far from being isolated jungle dwellers, the Maya participated in wide trade networks that moved jade, obsidian, salt, cacao, feathers, shells, ceramics, and other valuable goods across great distances. Jade from one region might be shaped into beads or masks in another, while obsidian blades from volcanic sources traveled into lowland cities where they became tools of daily life and ritual use. Salt, so ordinary to us, was essential for diet and preservation, and its distribution supported both local communities and urban populations. Cacao held special prestige, used in elite contexts and likely consumed as a frothy drink during feasts and ceremonies. Traders traveled by canoe along rivers and coasts, by foot along roads and paths, and through a landscape that was both difficult and richly connected. Goods carried more than utility, they carried meaning, status, and relationships. In many cases, an object's power came not only from what it was, but from where it had come and who had given it. As impressive as the Maya were, their civilization did not remain unchanged forever. In the southern lowlands, many major cities experienced political disruption, population decline, and eventual abandonment during what scholars often call the classic Maya collapse. This phrase can be misleading because it suggests a sudden ending, when in reality the process was uneven and stretched over generations. Some cities declined earlier, others later, and some regions remained occupied and culturally active. Environmental stress, warfare, shifting trade routes, internal conflict, and prolonged drought may all have played roles, though no single explanation fits every place. What is remarkable is that this was not the disappearance of the Maya people. It was a transformation of political life, settlement patterns, and regional power. Maya communities continued, adapted, and endured, carrying languages, rituals, and knowledge into later centuries. The ancient cities fell quiet in some places, but the civilization itself remained alive, still speaking through descendants who preserve parts of its legacy today. The Maya did not build their civilization in one single place, but across a wide world of forests, lowlands, highlands, coasts, and valleys, and that geographical variety shaped the way their cities grew. In some regions, the land was dotted with cenotes and limestone sinkholes, which provided water in dry areas and gave sacred meaning to the landscape. In others, rivers and volcanic soils supported dense farming. Because of this, ancient Maya life was never uniform. A person living near the northern Yucatan may have known a very different rhythm of daily life from someone in the Petén jungle or the Guatemalan highlands. Even so, the cities were connected by trade, diplomacy, warfare, and shared ideas. Over time, this created a broad cultural world that felt both diverse and unified, like many woven threads forming one large cloth. Archaeologists still study how much local identity mattered compared with wider Maya identity, and the answer seems to be both. The Maya were deeply regional, yet they were also part of an extended civilization of overlapping customs, languages, and sacred traditions. One of the most remarkable things about Maya cities is that they were often not separated sharply from the surrounding forest. Modern imagination sometimes pictures ancient cities as isolated stone centers, but many Maya settlements were more like living landscapes where buildings, gardens, causeways, fields, and managed woodland blended together. People did not simply clear the land and abandon it. They shaped it carefully, planting useful trees, tending orchards, and maintaining soils in ways that could support generations. Some researchers describe these environments as forest gardens, which suggests a kind of partnership between people and nature rather than total domination. Walking through such a place in the evening might have meant passing from a shaded household compound to a plaza, then back into cultivated trees heavy with fruit. The scent of smoke, maize, and damp earth would have filled the air. This closeness to the forest also meant that cities could feel alive in a more subtle way than stone alone suggests. Birdsong, insects, and wind through leaves would have accompanied the sound of ritual drums and human footsteps. Maya political power was often displayed not just in the size of a city, but in the way kings and elites used ceremony to make their authority visible. Rulers gathered people for public events that could include processions, offerings, bloodletting rituals, dances, and the dedication of monuments. These acts were not private performances. They were carefully staged moments meant to connect the ruler with cosmic order, ancestral memory, and divine approval. The king might appear dressed in elaborate jade, feathers, and shell ornaments, transforming himself into a living symbol of sacred power. Yet the performance was never only about luxury. It was also about obligation. The ruler was expected to maintain balance between human society and the unseen forces believed to shape reign, fertility, and fate. Some scholars think these ceremonies were part spiritual theatre, part political negotiation, and part communal reassurance. In that sense, a royal ritual was not just a display of wealth, but a way of reminding everyone that the universe, the city, and the dynasty were linked together in a fragile and meaningful order. The Maya were extraordinary record keepers, and one of their most famous achievements was their hieroglyphic writing system. This script was not a simple set of pictures, but a complex writing tradition that could represent sounds, words, names, dates, and grammatical structures. For a long time, much of it remained unread, and early scholars misunderstood the inscriptions as purely symbolic or decorative. But over decades of painstaking work, researchers learned to decipher more and more of the script, revealing historical records, royal lineages, war events, accession ceremonies, and even the names of individual artists and scribes. A stone monument that once looked silent can now speak in surprising detail. It can tell you who was born, who ruled, who captured whom, and when an event took place. This creates a very intimate feeling across centuries. Instead of only seeing anonymous ruins, we begin to hear human voices from the past. Still, the writing remains partly mysterious. Some signs are difficult to interpret, and some texts are damaged or incomplete, which means the script still offers new discoveries as if it were patiently waiting in the stone. Alongside their writing, the Maya developed a sophisticated system for understanding time, and this was central to how they experienced history and destiny. They used several interlocking calendars, including the sacred count of 260 days, the solar year of 365 days, and the long count, which could track very large spans of time. These calendars were not just practical tools for scheduling, they carried deep symbolic meaning. Dates mattered because days were believed to have different energies, and certain combinations could shape ritual life, naming ceremonies, accessions, and prophecy. A child born on one day might be thought to carry a different spiritual character from a child born on another. The long count allowed Maya scribes to mark events far into the past and future, linking the present to a grand cycle of creation and renewal. There is something soothing in the precision of this system, with its slow turning of numbers and periods, like a giant cosmic clock. At the same time, scholars continue to debate how ordinary people understood calendrical knowledge versus the elite specialists who calculated and used it most fully. Either way, time in the Maya world was not empty. It was alive with meaning. Maya art was often created with remarkable care for detail, but it also carried layers of social and religious significance. Painted ceramics, carved stele, stucco masks, jade ornaments, and mural scenes all helped shape the visual language of the civilization. A bowl might show a mythic scene or a courtly banquet. A jade bead might have passed through many hands before being placed in a tomb. Wall paintings could transform a room into a sacred narrative space, with bright pigments and lively figures appearing against plaster surfaces. Maya artists were not merely decorating objects, they were making meaning visible. Even the choice of color could matter. Red, blue, black, and green had associations that may have linked to blood, sky, water, fertility, or the sacred world. Some of the best preserved murals suggest that city life could be vibrant and full of movement, with scenes of feasting, dance, and diplomacy. Yet much Maya art has been lost to humidity, time, and the reuse of materials. What survives feels precious, like fragments of a much larger painted dream. The daily diet of the ancient Maya was centered on maize, but it was far more varied than a single crop. Maize was sacred and essential, appearing in myth and in the rhythm of farming life. Yet people also ate beans, squash, chili peppers, root crops, fruits, fish, turkey, deer, and a range of wild foods gathered from forest and wetland areas. Tortillas, tamales, and maize gruels likely formed the backbone of many meals, but households adapted to local conditions and seasonal availability. The flavor of Maya food would have been shaped by stones for grinding, clay vessels for cooking, and the aromatic heat of chili. Chocolate prepared from cacao was often consumed as a special beverage, especially among elites, and may have been mixed with spices or foamed in ceremonial contexts. That drink was not the sweet chocolate familiar today, but something more bitter, rich, and socially meaningful. The Maya viewed food not just as nourishment, but as relationship, with the land, with ancestors, and with the gods who sent rain and growth. Hunger, abundance, and ritual offering all belonged to the same world of dependence and care. The homes of ordinary Maya families were usually built from materials that were both practical and beautifully suited to the climate. Perishable walls of wattle and daub, thatched roofs, and raised platforms created houses that breathed with the environment. These structures have mostly disappeared from the archaeological record, which is one reason ancient elite stone buildings are so much more visible today. But the humble household was the true center of daily life. Families cooked, slept, wove cloth, stored food, raised children, and carried out small rituals in and around their compounds. A home might include a kitchen area, a sleeping platform, and a shaded space for work and conversation. In many communities, several related households clustered together, forming neighborhoods tied by kinship and mutual help. The architecture of ordinary life was therefore intimate and practical, shaped by the need for airflow, rain protection, and social belonging. Because these homes were built from living materials, They remind us that the Maya world was not only monumental. It was also tender, domestic, and quietly human. Trade linked distant parts of the Maya region and brought a great deal of movement into what might otherwise seem like a forested interior. Traders carried obsidian, jade, salt, cacao, shells, feathers, textiles, ceramics, and other valued goods along rivers, roads, and coastal routes. Some items came from far beyond the core Maya area, showing that the civilization was connected to broader Mesoamerican networks. Obsidian, for example, could travel from volcanic sources to distant cities where it was shaped into sharp tools and blades. Jade, prized for its beauty and sacred associations, was especially important in elite contexts. These exchanges were not only economic, they were also political and ceremonial, helping cities gain prestige and establish alliances. Markets likely existed in many places, though archaeologists still debate how formal and centralized they were in different periods. Still, it is easy to imagine busy gathering places with baskets, cloth bundles, smoke, bargaining, and the soft clink of shells or stone. Trade made the Maya world feel connected, like a web of paths extending through forest and water. Maya warfare was real and often intense, but it did not follow one simple pattern. Some conflicts were small-scale raids, aimed at capturing nobles, seizing tribute, or asserting dominance. Other wars were larger struggles between powerful kingdoms, involving alliances, betrayals, and shifting fronts over years or decades. Military actions appear in inscriptions, painted scenes, and archaeological evidence of burned buildings and defensive walls. Yet warfare was. In many Maya cities, the center of life was shaped not by one grand palace alone, but by a carefully ordered sacred landscape, where temples, courtyards, ball courts, and causeways worked together like parts of a living map. Walking through these places would have felt like moving through layers of meaning. A person might pass from the bright heat of an open plaza into the cooler shade of a narrow passage, then climb stone steps toward a shrine where incense drifted into the air. The arrangement was never accidental. Even when cities grew over centuries, each new structure often respected older sacred patterns, as if the city itself were remembering how it first came to be. Archaeologists still debate how much planning went into these centers at the start, and how much emerged gradually through tradition, politics, and ritual habit, but the effect remains clear. The ancient Maya created urban spaces that were not only practical, but deeply ceremonial, places where daily life and cosmic order could feel closely joined. A great deal of Maya architecture was built to impress, yet it also served to guide the body and the eye. Stairways rose steeply, forcing a slower climb. Doorways framed distant views. Facades were decorated with masks, serpents, and stone figures that seemed to watch from above. Many buildings were painted in vivid colors, some of which survive only in traces now, but once must have made the cities appear almost glowing in the sunlight. Red, blue, yellow, and black would have broken across plaster walls and carved stucco forms, turning stone into something animated and festive. The famous temples of places like Tikal, Palenque, and Kapan were not bare monuments as we often see them today. They were surfaces of color, texture, and symbol. Even the climbing of steps may have been part of the message, because reaching the top of a pyramid-like temple could feel like ascending from the ordinary world toward a realm of gods, ancestors, and heavenly forces. The Maya also paid careful attention to time, and one of the most impressive features of their civilization was the way they recorded it. Their calendars were not a single system, but several interlocking ones, each suited to different purposes. There was a ritual count of 260 days, a solar year of 365 days, and a longer system used for historical dates that could stretch across enormous spans of time. These calendars were part mathematics, part astronomy, and part sacred philosophy. Priests and scribes used them to mark ceremonies, determine auspicious days, and preserve dynastic history. The movement of time was not seen as abstract or empty. It was alive with qualities. Some days held greater power for planting, others for naming a child, others for crowning a ruler or dedicating a temple. Modern readers sometimes imagine ancient calendars as simple tools for counting, but for the Maya, time itself was woven into the structure of the universe. It carried memory, destiny, and rhythm, and those rhythms shaped the pace of life. Astronomy was closely tied to this understanding of time. Maya skywatchers studied the sun, moon, Venus, and other celestial cycles with extraordinary care, often from temple rooftops or open observatory-like structures. They watched where the sun rose on important dates, how shadows moved across stone markers, and when Venus appeared as the bright morning star. In some cities, buildings were aligned so that the sun would rise or set in exact relation to doorways, corners, or distant hills during solstices and equinoxes. This was not just a matter of visual beauty, it helped confirm the proper moment for ritual and agricultural action. The night sky, to the ancient Maya, was not empty space. It was a changing field of signs and divine presence. Yet scholars also caution against imagining a single unified astronomical doctrine. Different cities and periods may have emphasized different celestial events, and much of what we know comes from inscriptions, surviving codices, and architecture that must be interpreted carefully. Still, the precision is striking, and it suggests a culture of patient observation over many generations. The Maya scribes who recorded these patterns worked in a writing system that is among the most sophisticated in the ancient Americas. Their script combined logograms, which represented words or ideas, and syllabic signs, which represented sounds. This allowed for a remarkable range of expression. Names, titles, mythic episodes, war events, births, accessions to power, and ritual offerings could all be carved into stone or painted in bark paper books. For a long time, the script remained partly unreadable to modern scholars, and even now some signs are still debated. But the decipherment achieved in recent decades has opened an extraordinary window into ancient Maya voices. We can now hear rulers speaking through their monuments, announcing victories, honoring ancestors, and tying themselves to divine lineage. We can also see that literacy was specialized. It belonged to trained scribes, nobles, and ceremonial specialists, not to everyone. The act of writing itself carried prestige, and the carved glyphs often appear like elegant little blocks arranged with great care, each one fitting into a larger composition as though the text were also a work of art. Among the most familiar images associated with the Maya is the ball game, and in some ways it was more than a game and less than a game at the same time. Played in enclosed courts with a heavy rubber ball, it seems to have held ritual, political, and perhaps diplomatic significance. The exact rules varied by place and period, and historians are cautious about assuming a single version existed everywhere. Some courts suggest a game played with hips, thighs, and protective gear, while other images hint at a symbolic performance connected to mythic struggle. The ball court was often positioned in a prominent place within the city, close to temples and elite residences, which suggests that it was not merely recreation. It may have been a public drama of competition, fate, and sacred balance. The rubber ball itself would have been heavy and lively, striking stone with a deep, dull sound. Spectators may have gathered in the shade, listening as much as watching. In some cases, the game seems linked to stories of the hero twins and the underworld, stories that gave the contest cosmic weight and made every movement feel part of a larger sacred drama. Life in the Maya world was closely tied to agriculture, especially the cultivation of maize. Corn was more than a staple crop, it was a central symbol of life itself. The maize plant had a seasonal rhythm that echoed the human cycle of birth, growth, death, and renewal. Fields had to be cleared, planted, tended, and harvested with great attention to rainfall and soil conditions. In many regions, farmers used shifting cultivation, allowing plots to rest before planting again, while in wetter or more densely populated areas they developed raised fields, terraces, and water control systems. This varied enormously across Maya lands, from lowland forests to highland valleys. The image of the Maya as simply living in a jungle can be misleading. They transformed their environments in careful, local ways, yet they also depended deeply on the moods of rain and drought. A delayed storm or failed wet season could place real pressure on communities and rulers alike. The maize deity and related agricultural spirits appear often in Maya art, reminding us that farming was not only labor, but also prayer, vigilance, and trust in the turning of the seasons. Water, in fact, was one of the most precious resources in many Maya regions. Some cities were built in areas without easy rivers, which meant that managing rainwater became a central challenge. The Maya constructed reservoirs, channels, cisterns, and storage systems to capture and hold water through dry periods. In places such as Tikal, large reservoirs helped sustain populations during seasonal scarcity. Elsewhere, limestone landscapes required especially inventive solutions because water could disappear quickly into sinkholes and underground caverns. The ancient Maya also saw caves, cenotes, and watery openings as spiritually powerful places, not merely practical ones. These spaces were often linked to the underworld, to rain deities, and to offerings. Archaeologists have found pottery, jade, and other objects placed in such locations, sometimes as gifts to supernatural forces. The stillness of a cave pool or the deep blue light of a cenote must have felt profoundly charged. To the Maya, these were places where the surface world touched another realm, where water was both life-giving and mysterious, flowing between visible and hidden worlds. The relationship between rulers and the sacred order was central to Maya politics. Kings and queens did not rule only as military leaders or administrators. They were also ceremonial figures who mediated between human society and divine power. Their public actions often included bloodletting rites, offerings, dances, and the display of sacred regalia. Bloodletting in particular can seem startling to modern readers, but within the Maya worldview it was understood as a meaningful act of communication and renewal. Elites used obsidian blades or stingray spines to pierce the skin and offer blood to gods and ancestors. The imagery is dramatic, but the ritual context was structured and symbolic, not random violence. In inscriptions, rulers often present these acts as proofs of legitimacy, strength, and devotion. At the same time, the burden of kingship appears heavy. A ruler was expected to maintain order, ensure reign, honor ancestry, and protect the city through proper ritual conduct. When we read these monuments now, we are seeing not only claims to power, but the many responsibilities that power carried. Maya art, especially in the classic period, reveals a society with a deep affection for detail and symbolic richness. Painted vessels show courtly scenes, mythic beings, and elegant figures with carefully arranged headdresses and textiles. Carved stelae depict rulers standing in formal poses, often with inscriptions framing their bodies like a written halo. Jewelry made from jade, shell, and bone reflected both status and cosmological meaning. Jade in particular was highly prized, often associated with maize, water, breath, and life force because of its green color and luminous quality. A bead of jade might have carried not only wealth but sacred vitality. When archaeologists walk through Maya cities now, one of the first things they often notice is how much of the ancient world is still hidden. The forest did not simply erase the Maya, it folded their cities into itself. Roots grow through stairways, vines drape over temples, and low mounds that once held homes blend almost perfectly into the earth. Even at famous places, much of what we see is only a small part of the original settlement. In the lowlands especially, the jungle can make a royal center feel quiet and almost dreamlike, but beneath that silence lie plaster floors, buried courtyards, and layers of rebuilding. Maya cities were not frozen monuments. They were living places, changed and repaired over generations, so a single pyramid might contain older versions inside it, like a nesting doll of history. That is one reason excavation can feel so delicate and so intimate. It is not only about finding an object, but about uncovering the long rhythm of people returning to the same sacred ground, shaping it again and again with patience, labor, and memory. Much of that labor was organized through a system that scholars still study carefully: the relationship between rulers, nobles, specialists, and ordinary households. The ancient Maya were not one single empire under one capital. Instead, they were many kingdoms and city-states, each with its own dynasty, alliances, rituals, and rivalries. A king in one city might be a powerful patron of art and ceremony, while his neighbor could be a bitter enemy or a marriage partner, depending on the year and the political weather. This made Maya politics intensely local and deeply personal. Boundaries shifted, tributary relationships changed, captives were taken and displayed, and dynastic successions were carefully recorded on stone. Yet behind the formal titles and carved ceremonies, every kingdom still depended on farmers, potters, stonecutters, weavers, and merchants whose work sustained the court. The grandeur of a palace could never stand apart from the quiet repetitions of planting, carrying, grinding, and weaving that supported it. In that sense, Maya civilization was both dazzlingly hierarchical and profoundly communal, held together by many kinds of effort at once. One of the most remarkable things about the Maya world is how much attention they gave to time. Their calendars were not just practical tools for counting days. They were part of a whole way of thinking about movement, fate, ceremony, and cosmic order. The Maya tracked multiple cycles at once, including the 260-day ritual calendar and the 365-day solar year, and they could combine them into larger patterns that stretched across long spans of time. They were also among the most accomplished mathematicians of the ancient world, using a positional number system and a concept of zero that allowed them to make sophisticated calculations. The idea of zero may sound abstract and distant, but in Maya hands it became something very practical, almost sacred in its precision. It helped them keep track of huge intervals in inscriptions and monuments. It also gave their civilization a sense that history itself could be measured, named, and situated within a vast sequence of beginnings and endings. Their calendars did not make life predictable in the modern sense, but they did offer an ordered framework in which ceremony, kingship, and astronomy could all seem beautifully aligned. That careful relationship with time also appears in the way the Maya observed the sky. They followed the movements of the sun, moon, planets, and stars with extraordinary care, and many buildings seem to have been oriented to mark celestial events. At some sites, a temple might frame the sunrise on a solstice or the appearance of Venus at a particular point on the horizon. We should be cautious, though, because not every alignment was intentional, and not every building can be read as a simple astronomical instrument. Still, there is enough evidence to show that the heavens mattered deeply. The sky was not a remote backdrop. It was active, luminous, and full of meaning. In the hush before dawn, when the forest is still cool and the first pale light reaches a stone staircase, it is not difficult to imagine why. For the Maya, watching the heavens may have been a way of confirming that human ritual belonged within a larger cosmic cycle. The rising of Venus, the return of the sun, the phases of the moon, all could carry political and religious significance, linking a king's ceremony to the order of the universe itself. Religion in the Maya world was also closely tied to landscapes that could feel alive and layered with presence. Caves, cenotes, mountaintops, and springs were not simply features of geography. They were openings into other realms, places where water, darkness, and stone suggested a passage between worlds. In the northern lowlands, cenotes were especially important since they provided water in a region with few surface rivers. Some were used for offerings, and in a few cases archaeologists have found human remains, ceramics, jade, and other valuable materials within them. Such deposits remind us that sacred practice could involve both devotion and danger. A cenote might nourish a community and also connect it to powerful unseen forces. Caves, too, were treated with reverence, sometimes as womb-like places of origin or as gateways to ancestors and deities. The Maya did not separate belief from environment in the way modern categories often do. A forested hill, a pool of water, or a dark chamber underground could all be part of a sacred geography, rich with meaning and memory. Even now, in the humid stillness of these places, the air seems to hold something old and watchful. Within that sacred world, the Maya imagined a rich pantheon of gods, spirits, and supernatural beings, though these were not always fixed in simple forms. Many deities changed appearance across regions and periods, blending human, animal, and symbolic traits. Gods of rain, maize, fire, death, and creation recur in the surviving texts and images, but Maya religion was not a neat catalogue of separate divine personalities. It was more fluid than that, with gods capable of transformation and overlap. A deity might wear the signs of a jaguar, the shell of the underworld, or the curling features of wind and storm. Rulers, too, could take on divine roles in ceremonies, not by becoming gods in the modern sense, but by acting as intermediaries between communities and the supernatural order. Bloodletting rituals, though unsettling to us, were often understood as offerings of life force, a way to sustain cosmic balance. These ceremonies were highly symbolic and deeply political, performed in public and carefully recorded in art. They remind us that Maya religion was not confined to temples. It lived in bodies, in textiles, in incense smoke, and in the formal gestures of kings and priests beneath the open sky. Just as religion shaped public life, so did writing. The Maya created one of the most advanced writing systems in the ancient Americas, combining logograms and syllabic signs into a flexible and visually elegant script. For centuries, much of this writing was misunderstood or lost, especially after Spanish conquest and the destruction of many books. Yet the remaining inscriptions on stelae, stairways, ceramics, lintels, and portable objects have allowed scholars to recover much of the language of royal history. The script could record dates, names, titles, warfare, ritual acts, and even poetic descriptions. It was not used by everyone in the same way, and literacy may have been concentrated among elites and specialists, but its presence across many forms of art shows how central written expression was to Maya identity. There is something especially moving about the survival of these carved signs. A stone monument in the forest might have stood silent for centuries, yet the names it carries can still be read. The voice is not fully lost. It has merely waited, hidden in weathered glyphs for careful eyes to return. Among the most vivid pieces of Maya material culture are their ceramics. Pottery was not just for daily use, though it certainly served practical needs for cooking, storage, and serving. It also carried stories, rank, and ritual meaning. Painted vessels could show mythological scenes, courtly gatherings, dancing figures, supernatural beings, or scenes of drinking cacao. Some were made for elite feasts, some for burial offerings, and some for everyday life in humble households. The forms, colors, and inscriptions can reveal where a vessel was made, what it contained, and who may have owned it. Cacao, especially, occupied a special place. It was consumed as a beverage, often frothy and flavored with spices, and it had strong associations with status and ceremony. To imagine a Maya banquet is to picture a dimly lit hall, the scent of smoke and food, painted vessels passed from hand to hand, and conversation flowing beneath banners or torches. Yet pottery also speaks of ordinary intimacy. A cracked bowl near a hearth, a water jar kept in shade, a small serving plate used by a family each day. These quieter objects remind us that the ancient Maya world was made not only of kings and temples, but of kitchens, gardens, and the patient routine of domestic life. That domestic life was closely connected to agriculture, especially the cultivation of maize, beans, squash, chili, and many other plants. Maize was more than a staple crop. It stood at the center of Maya cosmology and identity, appearing in myth, ritual, and art as a life-giving substance. The famous creation stories preserved in the Popol Vuh, though written down much later after conquest, reflect a world in which humans are fashioned from maize dough. This does not mean every ancient Maya community told the same story in the same way, but it does show how deeply the plant was woven into ideas of personhood. Fields were carefully managed through techniques that varied by region, including milpa agriculture, raised fields in wetland areas, and terracing on hillsides. The landscape was not simply exploited, it was tended, modified, and understood through generations of experience. Farmers had to read rain patterns, soil conditions, forestry growth, and seasonal timing with great care. That practical knowledge, passed through families and communities, was one. In the great cities of the Maya lowlands, one of the most impressive signs of power was the ability to gather labor, materials, and food for enormous public works. And this was often done through systems of tribute and obligation rather than through coin or wages. The Maya did not use money in the modern sense, yet their societies were highly organized, and rulers relied on communities to support temples, palaces, road building, and ritual events. Farmers might contribute maize, beans, squash, cacao, cotton cloth, salt, obsidian blades, or their time and strength. The exact balance between voluntary service, tribute, and state authority could vary from place to place, and scholars still debate how centralized some cities really were. What is clear is that the movement of goods was constant and essential. Warehouses, courtyards, and ceremonial spaces were not only places of display, but places where the ordinary material life of the kingdom was managed. In this way, the ancient Maya world was held together by a rhythm of giving, carrying, and storing, a quiet infrastructure beneath the grandeur of stone pyramids and carved monuments. That same practical order extended into the home, where most Maya people lived in humble, carefully arranged household compounds rather than in palaces or temples. A typical family residence might consist of several thatched buildings set around a small courtyard, with one structure used for sleeping, another for cooking, and another for storage or craft work. The walls might be built from wattle and daub, stone in some regions, or perishable materials that leave few traces behind after centuries have passed. Because of this, archaeologists often find the grand public architecture first, and only later uncover the softer evidence of domestic life. Yet those houses tell an intimate story. Grinding stones, cooking vessels, spindle whorls, obsidian flakes, and the remains of hearths reveal daily routines repeated for generations. Smoke from the cooking fire would have drifted under the eaves in the early morning, and the smell of maize dough or roasted chili would have mixed with damp earth and cedar wood. Life in the household was the foundation of Maya civilization, and the monumental city was, in a sense, built from countless ordinary mornings like that. Inside these communities, children learned by watching, imitating, and helping, rather than through formal schools in the modern sense. A child might carry water, gather firewood, tend younger siblings, or assist with shelling maize and preparing food. Boys and girls both learned essential skills from parents and relatives, though their tasks often became more specialized with age. Some children were trained in textile production, pottery, farming, or ritual service, while others may have entered elite education in palace settings, learning writing, astronomy, genealogy, and court etiquette. We know surprisingly little about childhood as an emotional world, because ancient texts rarely linger on the ordinary private life of children, but scenes in painted ceramics sometimes show young figures seated beside adults in moments of teaching or ceremony. The Maya seem to have understood growth as a gradual shaping of character and duty. A child became part of the world through routine, through memory, and through the careful repetition of useful acts, until the lessons of home became the skills of adulthood. Among the many crafts that sustained the Maya economy, textile production was especially important, though it survives only faintly in the archaeological record. Cloth was made from cotton in some regions and from other fibrous plants, and spinning and weaving were often domestic tasks carried out by women, though not exclusively. Weights for warp threads, spindle whorls, needles, and depictions of women at weaving frames help reconstruct this quiet industry. Cloth was more than clothing. It was tribute, gift, status marker, and sometimes ceremonial offering. Elaborate garments could signal rank at court, and finely woven fabric may have been a valuable trade item across the lowlands and highlands. The colors would have come from natural dyes, producing reds, blues, yellows, and deep earthy tones, each one softened by the humidity of the tropics and the steady handling of daily use. Because textiles decay quickly in the forest soil, much of this world has vanished, and what survives are the tools and the images. Even so, the evidence suggests a landscape in which spinning fiber and folding cloth were as central to civilization as carving stone. The Maya also developed a deep and practical relationship with cacao, the seeds of a tropical tree that became one of the most valued luxury goods in Mesoamerica. Cacao was grown in warm, wet regions and probably traded over long distances to places where the climate was less suitable for cultivation. Its beans could be processed into a bitter drink, often flavored with spices or maize, and the beverage appears in elite settings, feasts, and ritual scenes. Later sources suggest that cacao seeds sometimes functioned as a medium of exchange, though the precise use of cacao as currency varied and should not be oversimplified. It was certainly valuable, but its value was also symbolic and social. To consume cacao was to participate in ceremony, hospitality, and status. Imagine the deep aroma of roasted beans, the froth of a poured drink, the slight bitterness softened by heat and spice. In the Maya world, this was not just refreshment. It was a sign of connection between people, places, and the cultivated landscape. As much as the Maya built cities of stone, they also understood the power of water, especially in regions where rivers, cenotes, reservoirs, and seasonal rains determined survival. Many major sites were not located beside permanent flowing rivers, so communities developed sophisticated ways to capture and store rainwater. In some places, large artificial reservoirs were lined and managed to hold water through dry periods. The famous cenotes of the northern lowlands, natural sinkholes filled with groundwater, were especially important on the Yucatan Peninsula, where they could serve as vital sources of water and also as sacred places. Water was never merely practical. It belonged to the realm of the gods, storms, fertility, and renewal. Offerings were sometimes made in watery places, and storms themselves were understood as expressions of divine force. The sound of rain on plaster roofs, the glimmer of standing water in a courtyard basin, the coolness of a shaded cistern, these sensory details would have shaped the experience of every season. The management of water was therefore both engineering and ritual, a discipline of survival entwined with reverence. Maya rulers often strengthened their authority through public ceremonies that brought together art, music, incense, bloodletting, and collective witnessing. These events were designed to make political power visible and sacred at the same time. A ruler might appear in elaborate dress, carrying a ceremonial staff or wearing a towering headdress of feathers, jade, and cloth. Nobles and attendants formed a carefully arranged audience, while conch shells, drums, whistles, and rattles created a layered soundscape around the ritual action. Incense smoke rose from censers, sometimes with the sharp scent of copal resin, and the whole setting would have felt thick with expectation. Such ceremonies were not simply spectacles for entertainment. They helped confirm the ruler's relationship to ancestors, gods, and community. Inscriptions sometimes record these rituals as the foundation of legitimacy, but the lived experience would have been more immediate and emotional. The flicker of torchlight on painted stucco, the tension before a speech, the hush that follows a chant. Political authority in the Maya world was made and remade in these moments, again and again, before the eyes of the people. Alongside the courts and temples, the ancient Maya also practiced forms of diplomacy that relied on gift exchange, marriage alliances, and carefully managed conflict. City-states did not always form a single unified empire. Instead, they existed as a network of competing powers, each with its own rulers, nobles, and sacred lineages. Some cities grew strong for a time and then declined, while others rose in their place. Alliances could shift, and war might break out over tribute routes, prestige, or political succession. Marriage between noble houses could help stabilize relations, and the exchange of luxury goods often carried diplomatic meaning. A jade ornament, a fine vessel, a bundle of feathers, or a ceremonial cloth might speak more loudly than a formal treaty. The fragmentary texts left on stele and ceramics sometimes reveal enemies, captives, and royal visitors, but the fuller texture of diplomacy remains partly hidden. Even so, it is possible to imagine the careful politeness of court envoys, the heat of negotiation, the anxious wait for response, and the subtle tension between kinship and rivalry in a world where political borders were often expressed through memory and ceremony rather than lines on a map. The Maya calendar system was another remarkable framework that shaped daily and ceremonial life. It combined several cycles, including a 260-day ritual calendar and a 365-day solar year, which together formed larger patterns of time. Dates could be extraordinarily precise, allowing scribes to place events within a long historical sequence. For the Maya, time was not a flat or empty container. It was ordered, meaningful, and alive with recurrence. Certain days were favorable for planting, others for ritual, others for names, accession, or divination. The flow of time felt patterned, as if the world itself moved through breaths and turns. This system of reckoning helped organize ceremonies, political anniversaries, and cosmological understanding. The famous long count notation, used in some regions and periods, extended historical memory over vast spans, allowing elites to situate their reigns within a larger sacred chronology. To read a Maya date is to step into a worldview where history, astronomy, and ritual were woven together. The calendar was not just a tool for keeping track of days. It was a way of understanding the relationship between human action and the larger motion of the universe. This same sensitivity to time and pattern appears in Maya divination and in the work of specialists who interpreted signs, illnesses, dreams, and omens. Not every aspect of religious life was public and monumental. Much of it would have taken place in smaller settings, perhaps in homes or quiet ritual spaces, where trained individuals used observation and inherited knowledge to. By the time we reach the later centuries of Maya history, the great cities were no longer isolated monuments hidden in the forest, but parts of a wider world linked by trade, diplomacy, rivalry, and ceremonial exchange. One of the most revealing examples is the city of Calakmul, deep in the lowland jungle, which rose as a powerful rival to Tikal. Its rulers helped shape the political map of the classic Maya period, not just through war, but through alliances that reached into neighboring kingdoms. In the inscriptions, Calakmul is sometimes associated with a larger political network often called the Snake Kingdom, though scholars continue to debate exactly how centralized or flexible that network really was. What is clear is that power in the Maya world could travel far beyond a city's stone walls. A ruler in one place might influence decisions in another through marriage ties, ceremonial visits, tribute, or military support. These relationships were not abstract. They were lived and remembered in carved stone, painted ceramics, and carefully timed rituals. The sounds of such power would have included drums, conch shells, spoken prayers, and the rustle of woven cloth in palace courtyards. And beneath all of it was a quiet political truth familiar in many ancient societies. Even the most splendid city depended on the careful maintenance of friendships and fears. The Maya also developed a highly refined calendar system, and the beauty of it lies partly in its layered complexity. They did not use a single simple count of days, but several interlocking systems that allowed priests and scribes to record ritual dates, historical events, and cycles of time with remarkable precision. The 260-day sacred count, often called the Tzolk'in, worked alongside the 365-day solar year known as the Harb. And these two calendars formed a repeating pattern that organized religious life and daily affairs. Beyond that, the long count allowed the Maya to mark dates across vast stretches of time, giving history a framework that could extend far beyond one lifetime. This was not merely an exercise in arithmetic. Time was sacred, living, and patterned. Certain days were favorable for rulership, others for planting, others for offering blood, and others for remembering the births or accessions of kings. Some scholars once imagined that the Maya were obsessed with time in a cold mathematical sense, but that is not quite right. Their calendars were woven into ceremony, astronomy, agriculture, and kingship. To live within them was to move through a world where the sky, the earth, and the remembered past all seemed to answer one another quietly. Among the most striking achievements of Maya civilization is the writing system itself, a script made of glyphs that could express sounds, words, names, places, and ideas. For a long time, this script was only partly understood, and early scholars mistook it for a mostly symbolic or purely decorative system. Modern decipherment has shown that Maya writing was far more sophisticated. It could record spoken language, including verbs, titles, dynastic statements, and even speech markers that suggest how people talked in courtly settings. The stones of temples and stelae became durable pages, and the bark paper books known as codices carried deeper layers of knowledge. Some glyphs remain debated, and not every sign is fully agreed upon, which leaves room for continuing discovery. Yet what is already known is extraordinary. The Maya were not only builders and astronomers, but also careful archivists of memory. Through their inscriptions, they preserved anniversaries, bloodlines, victories, and ritual obligations. One can imagine a scribe bending over a smooth surface in the warmth of the day, brush in hand, working patiently with the pressure of tradition behind each line. The act of writing was not separate from power. It was one of the ways power made itself visible and lasting. In the quieter landscape of ordinary life, the majority of Maya people were farmers, and their daily routines sustained the grandeur of the cities. Maize was central, of course, but so were beans, squash, chili peppers, cacao, root crops, and many local plants suited to different soils and microclimates. Farming methods varied by region, and scholars continue to study how the Maya adapted to wetlands, uplands, forest margins, and seasonal water patterns. In some areas, they built raised fields and canals. In others, they cleared and rotated plots through more flexible cycles of cultivation. The ancient Maya were often described in older books as if they somehow farmed recklessly in fragile forests, but that view is far too simple. They were skilled ecological managers who understood local environments with practical precision. The hum of cicadas, the scent of wet earth, and the patient rhythm of planting and harvesting would have shaped the year as surely as any royal ceremony. Maize itself was not just food. It was identity, nourishment, and sacred substance, reflected in myth and ritual. The growing of crops was therefore both labor and cosmology, a way of maintaining the balance between human community and the living landscape around it. The world of Maya religion was equally rich, and it cannot be reduced to a single pantheon or neatly arranged list of gods. Instead, it seems to have involved a flexible and overlapping set of divine beings, ancestors, supernatural forces, and sacred places. Mountains, caves, springs, and trees could all be charged with meaning. Kings often acted as intermediaries, performing bloodletting rituals or visionary ceremonies to communicate with gods and ancestors. Such practices may sound severe to modern ears, yet within Maya thought they were expressions of duty, renewal, and cosmic exchange. Life was sustained by sacrifice, and sacrifice was understood as participation in the same cycles that governed rain, fertility, and the movement of the heavens. Some rituals used incense, reflective mirrors, jade ornaments, and images of serpents or deities emerging from smoke. Others likely took place in dim interiors or on temple summits at dawn, when the air was still cool and the first light touched the stone. There is still scholarly caution here, because the surviving evidence is partial and often filtered through colonial accounts. Even so, the broad picture is clear. The sacred world of the Maya was intimate, powerful, and deeply woven into ordinary and royal life alike. Their cities, too, were shaped by this union of ritual and urban design. Maya ceremonial centers were not planned in the modern sense of symmetrical civic grids, but they were carefully arranged to align with terrain, celestial observation, processional movement, and symbolic visibility. Tall pyramids rose above plazas, and palaces formed complex clusters of rooms, courtyards, and vaulted chambers. At sunrise or sunset, the light would fall across carved facades, making relief figures seem to stir from the stone. Many cities included ball courts, which were not simple sports arenas but highly charged ritual spaces. The ball game appears throughout Mesoamerica, and among the Maya it likely carried meanings related to conflict, renewal, and the movement between realms of life and death. The rules may have varied from place to place, which makes the game all the more fascinating. It was both athletic and symbolic, a performance watched by nobles and commoners alike. Some scenes on pottery and monuments suggest that games could be tied to political events or mythic reenactments. The echo of a bouncing rubber ball in a stone court under a wide, humid sky must have been one of the more memorable sounds in a Maya city, brief and powerful before fading into the rustling of leaves. As we move through the centuries, the later classic period reveals a world of both brilliance and strain. Many major cities were still active, and art, architecture, and inscription reached remarkable heights, yet the political landscape was becoming more fragmented. Rival dynasties contended for authority, trade routes shifted, environmental pressures may have intensified in some regions, though the exact role of drought, warfare, deforestation, overpopulation, and political instability remains debated. Modern scholarship strongly resists any single-cause explanation for Maya decline, because the collapse was not uniform and did not happen everywhere at once. Some cities faltered earlier than others endured in transformed forms. In fact, the word collapse can mislead, because it suggests a sudden end rather than a long, uneven reorganization. What happened was more like a series of regional adjustments, abandonments, migrations, and survivals. Forest eventually covered many once busy places, but the people did not vanish. Maya communities continued and continue today. The stone temples grew quiet, but languages, stories, and traditions remained alive in new forms. This is one of the deepest lessons of Maya history. Civilization is not only what is left in ruins, it is also what persists in memory, adaptation, and renewed life. The post-classic period brought important changes, and new centers rose to prominence in different parts of the Maya world. Chichén Itzá, in particular, became one of the most famous urban centers of later Maya history. Its architecture shows both continuity with earlier traditions and influences that suggest wider interaction across Mesoamerica. Columns, warrior imagery, and certain iconographic motifs indicate broader ties beyond the lowlands, though scholars differ in how to interpret these connections. Was Chichén Itzá a cosmopolitan city shaped by long-distance exchange, migration, and political openness? Very likely, though the exact mechanisms remain under discussion. What makes the site so compelling is its layered character. It contains familiar Maya elements, but also striking forms that hint at new political and ceremonial ideas. Cenotes, or natural sinkholes filled with water, were especially important there, serving as sacred and practical features in the dry northern landscape. The shimmer of water in a limestone sinkhole, edged by vines and stone, would have carried immense significance in a region where rainfall could be seasonal and uncertain. In such places, landscape itself became part of ritual memory, and the natural world was not a backdrop, but a participant in human history. Trade connected these cities and helped sustain their complexity. The Maya moved obsidian, jade, salt, cacao, shells, textiles, feathers, ceramics, and prestige goods across regional networks that reached from the highlands to the coasts. Obsidian blades, sharp and glassy, came from volcanic sources far from the lowland forests. Jade, with its cool green depth, was treasured. When archaeologists study a Maya city in the quiet of the forest, they often begin with the buildings that survived best above the soil, but some of the most revealing evidence lies far below, in the buried layers where time moved slowly and almost invisibly. Many Maya centers were rebuilt again and again on the same ground, with new temples rising over older ones, and plazas being resurfaced so many times that the past became sealed beneath the present. This means that a single mound can contain centuries of history, stacked like pages in a book no one was meant to read for a very long time. In places such as Tikal, Kapan, and Calakmul, excavators have found earlier structures hidden inside later ones, sometimes preserved almost like fossils in stone. The Maya did not simply abandon old spaces and move on. They often folded memory into the architecture itself, allowing one generation to stand on the work of another. Even today, when a trench opens and a carved stair or painted wall emerges from the earth, there is a feeling that the city has been quietly keeping its secrets, breathing under roots and leaves, waiting for the moment it could be seen again. One of the most fascinating windows into Maya life comes not from grand temples, but from the small, everyday objects that survived in households and workshops. Broken potsherds, spindle whorls, grinding stones, obsidian flakes, and worn tools can tell us how people cooked, spun thread, sharpened blades, and prepared maize. In many ancient cities, ordinary homes were built of perishable materials and have largely disappeared, so these humble objects become especially precious. A stone metate with a smooth, polished surface suggests years of grinding corn into dough for tortillas and tamales. A cluster of shell beads may hint at adornment, trade, or ritual. Even the ash in a hearth can preserve traces of food and fuel, helping scholars reconstruct daily routines that never found their way onto monuments. The great rulers of the Maya are often remembered through carved stelae and royal names, but the texture of life was carried by thousands of quieter actions. Morning after morning, smoke rose from cooking fires, maize was ground, water was fetched, and the rhythm of the household continued in a steady human way. The Maya were also remarkable observers of the natural world, and their understanding of time was tied closely to the movements of the sky. They watched the sun, the moon, Venus, and the seasonal turning of the year with extraordinary care. To modern eyes, the Maya calendar can seem intricate and almost dreamlike, but it was grounded in long cycles of practical observation. Farmers needed to know when the rains might arrive, when fields should be cleared, and when the landscape was ready for planting. Priests and scribes recorded dates in systems that joined ritual life to astronomical pattern, linking human events to cosmic order. Venus held particular importance, often associated with warfare, transformation, and danger, its bright appearances marking moments of power and expectation. Some Maya inscriptions appear to track eclipses and planetary cycles with great precision, though scholars still debate how exactly this knowledge was used in different regions and periods. What remains clear is that the sky was not distant to the Maya. It was active, meaningful, and alive with signals, and every dawn may have felt like a carefully interpreted return. In many ancient Maya settlements, water was both abundant and vulnerable, and its management shaped the very structure of city life. Some cities were built in regions with seasonal rainfall and no permanent rivers nearby, so people depended on reservoirs, chultuns, canals, and carefully maintained natural basins. During the rainy season, water could be collected and stored for the dry months, while earthworks helped direct flow through neighborhoods and agricultural zones. At some sites, Archaeologists have found evidence of plaster-lined cisterns and broad holding tanks that would have shimmered in the sun after a storm. These systems required labor, planning, and regular maintenance, and they reveal how deeply the Maya adapted to local environments rather than simply occupying them. Water was not only a resource but also a sacred substance, associated with caves, rain deities, and fertility. A quiet pool in the forest, a sinkhole opening into limestone, or a reservoir beside a temple may all have held practical and ceremonial importance at once. To live in a Maya city was to live in close conversation with water, to depend on its arrival, and to fear both drought and flood. The Maya economy was woven together by trade routes that carried valuable goods across forests, coasts, wetlands, and mountains. Jade from the Motagua Valley, obsidian from highland sources, shells from the Caribbean and Pacific, cacao, salt, feathers, and fine ceramics all moved through networks of exchange that connected distant communities. Some of these materials were transformed into royal regalia or ritual offerings, while others were used in everyday life. Obsidian in particular was prized for its sharpness and glassy sheen, and though it could appear almost black, held to the light it sometimes reveals a greenish or smoky translucence. Traders traveled by river, canoe, footpath, and perhaps along well-marked seasonal corridors, carrying bundles of goods and news at the same time. Not all exchange was market-based in the modern sense. Tribute, gift-giving, alliance, and redistribution all likely played roles, varying by place and era. The movement of a small bead or a polished blade can therefore open a wide view onto diplomacy, power, and interregional connection. Even the smallest object might have taken a long journey before resting in a tomb or a household floor. Maya rulers often presented themselves not simply as political leaders, but as intermediaries between the human realm and the divine. Their images appear on stelae, lintels, painted ceramics, and temple facades, often in elaborate dress with jade jewelry, feathered headdresses, and regalia that signaled sacred authority. Yet the role of kingship was not static. Some rulers emphasized military conquest, while others highlighted ritual performance, lineage, or ties to ancestor gods. Inscriptions record accession ceremonies, captive-taking, bloodletting rites, and major calendrical anniversaries, suggesting that rulership was enacted through repeated acts rather than inherited title alone. The king or queen stood at the center of a social and cosmic system, expected to maintain harmony through ceremony, generosity, and sometimes warfare. At the same time, these images were carefully crafted political messages, and scholars must read them with caution. A monument tells us how a ruler wished to be seen, not always how every subject experienced that rule. Still, in the carved faces and formal poses of royal portraits, there remains a powerful sense of presence, as if the stone itself had been asked to remember a voice, a gesture, and a moment of ceremony long ago. Maya writing gives the ancient world a particularly intimate voice because it allows names, dates, events, and titles to speak across centuries. The script was made of hundreds of signs, combining logograms and syllabic symbols in a highly flexible system. Scribes painted it on ceramics, carved it into stone, modeled it in stucco, and sometimes wrote it in books. For a long time, modern scholars could not fully read the inscriptions, and even now there are signs and passages that remain uncertain or debated, but enough has been deciphered to reveal a rich historical landscape of dynasties, alliances, wars, ritual acts, and personal names. This was not a single universal language of every Maya community. Different languages were spoken across the region, and the writing system adapted to them in complex ways. Scribes who mastered it were highly trained specialists, likely working close to elite courts. Their work was elegant and deliberate, often arranged in balanced blocks that invite the eye to linger. There is something deeply serene in seeing how a history can be compressed into a few carved signs, each one carrying sound, meaning, and memory in a compact and almost meditative form. Alongside these records of power, The Maya world also included places of retreat, reflection, and sacred depth. Caves were especially important in many regions, understood as openings into the earth and connections to origins, rain, ancestors, and gods. The darkness inside a cave, cool and still, contrasted sharply with the bright plazas above, and this contrast may have heightened its spiritual significance. Archaeologists have found offerings of pottery, incense burners, figurines, and human remains in some cave contexts, though each site must be interpreted carefully because use varied widely. Water dripping through limestone, the echo of footsteps, and the scent of damp stone would have created an atmosphere unlike any other ritual setting. The Maya may have seen caves as womb-like spaces, places of emergence and transformation, or as entrances to underworld realms where divine beings moved through shadow. Even natural sinkholes or cenotes could serve as sacred sites, combining water, depth, and mystery. These environments remind us that sacred life was not limited to the grand architecture of cities. It also unfolded in hidden places beneath the hills, where the earth itself seemed to open and breathe. The ancient Maya also made careful use of color, and traces of paint on buildings, pottery, and sculpture suggest a world far more vivid than the weathered stone we usually see today. Temples were sometimes covered in bright red, blue, yellow, green, and black pigments, and figures on ceramics were painted with careful attention to costume, gesture, and scene. Over centuries, rain and sunlight faded these surfaces, but in some protected spaces, the remains of color still allow glimpses of the original brilliance. Blue, especially the famous pigment now often called Maya blue, has drawn special interest because of its remarkable durability. Scholars continue to study how it was made, and while its exact recipes and regional variations may differ, the pigment seems to have combined organic and mineral components in a way that made it unusually resistant to time. Color was not merely decorative. It conveyed status, ritual meaning, and perhaps cosmological associations, turning architecture into a living visual environment. To imagine a city in its original state is to picture not grey ruins but painted. In the Maya world, counting was never just a technical skill. It was a way of holding time in the hand, of making the movement of the heavens feel ordered and knowable. Their number system was vigesimal, based on 20, which suited the rhythm of counting fingers and toes, but it was also deeply elegant in its use of position. A shell-like symbol could mean 0, a dot could mean 1, a bar could mean 5, and combinations of these signs could build numbers that stretched far beyond ordinary daily use. This mattered in royal inscriptions, in tribute records, in ritual calendar counts, and in the careful prediction of future dates. The idea of 0, especially, is one of the quiet marvels of ancient mathematics. In Maya writing, it appears as a placeholder and a concept, not simply an absence but a necessary part of an ordered system. Scholars continue to admire how fully developed this arithmetic was, and how naturally it fit into the broader Maya habit of linking mathematical precision with sacred time. That sense of ordered time became especially vivid in the great calendar rounds and long counts used by Maya scribes. Two principal calendars moved alongside one another, the 260-day ritual cycle and the 365-day solar year. Their interweaving created repeating patterns, while the long count could stretch historical memory across centuries. Dates carved on monuments were not just labels. They anchored events in a vast framework that connected kings to the cycles of creation, renewal, and cosmic turning. When a monument recorded a royal accession or a temple dedication, the date helped place that moment inside an expanding history that could be read by later generations. The accuracy of these calculations shows an intense intellectual commitment to watching the sky, to observing season after season, and to preserving time in stone. Even now, the calendar system can feel strangely intimate, as though the ancient scribes were listening carefully to the slow breathing of the world. Alongside these great systems of measurement stood the everyday technologies of Maya life, often more modest in appearance, but just as revealing. Looms, metates, pottery kilns, obsidian blades, and woven baskets formed the material background of cities and villages. Women commonly spun cotton thread with spindle whorls, and textile production was a major craft, though the fabrics themselves rarely survive in the humid climate. We know their importance partly from images on painted vessels and reliefs, where garments are shown with intricate patterns, fringe, and embroidery-like detail. A well-made cloth could serve as tribute, trade good, and social statement. Clothing did not merely cover the body, it expressed rank, ritual role, and local identity. Archaeologists often reconstruct this world through fragments, stains, tools, and scenes preserved in art, building a picture of a society where skilled labor moved quietly through daily life, creating the textures that surrounded ceremony and commerce alike. Trade linked those textures to broader regions. The Maya did not live in isolation, and their cities participated in networks that moved salt, obsidian, jade, cacao, feathers, shell, honey, cotton, and ceramics across great distances. Coastal communities gathered marine resources, while highland zones supplied volcanic stone and green obsidian, and inland forests yielded latex, spices, and timber. Markets likely operated in many Maya settlements, though their exact form varied by place and period, and scholars continue to debate how centralized or frequent they were. Still, evidence from storage areas, portable goods, and iconography suggests lively exchange. In some plazas, people may have gathered under bright sun with small heaps of produce, woven bags, polished beads, or baskets of maize. Trade was not only economic, it carried ideas, styles, and religious symbols, helping different communities recognize one another within a shared but diverse cultural world. That diversity can also be seen in the Maya relationship to the natural environment. The landscape was never a blank stage. It was a living field of forest, cave, river, sinkhole, limestone plain, and seasonal rainfall. The tropical lowlands could appear lush, but farming there demanded deep knowledge of soil, water, and timing. Some regions used raised fields, terracing, drainage systems, and water reservoirs to support dense populations. Other communities relied on milpa agriculture, rotating fields of maize, beans, squash, and other crops through a cycle of clearing, burning, planting, and fallow recovery. This was not a primitive dependence on simple methods. It was a practical, adaptable system shaped by centuries of experience. The ancient Maya understood that abundance had to be negotiated with drought, erosion, and the unpredictable rhythm of rain. Their agricultural landscape was therefore both cultivated and fragile, a human collaboration with a demanding climate. Water itself held profound meaning. In places where surface rivers were scarce, cenotes, caves, and underground passages became crucial sources of life and sacred power. The Yucatan Peninsula in particular contains natural sinkholes that open into the limestone below, some filled with clear water, some descending into darkness. These places were often associated with the underworld, ancestors, and rain deities. Offerings found in cenotes include pottery, jewelry, tools, and occasionally human remains, indicating that water sources could become ritual destinations as well as practical necessities. The sound of dripping water in a cave chamber, the cool air rising from a sinkhole, the sudden gleam of sunlight on wet stone, these sensory elements help us imagine why such places inspired reverence. For the Maya, the boundaries between resource and shrine were sometimes very thin, and water was both the substance of survival and a pathway into sacred geography. The same blending of the practical and the sacred appears in Maya medicine and healing. Healers likely used plants, massage, ritual speech, and spiritual diagnosis to treat illness, and later colonial accounts preserve traces of this knowledge. The forest offered bark, leaves, resins, and roots with recognized properties, while dreams, omens, and supernatural causes were also part of the interpretive frame. Illness might be understood as imbalance, intrusion, loss of soul, or divine displeasure. Because many healing practices were passed orally, the full picture remains elusive, and much was certainly lost after conquest and conversion. Yet the surviving evidence suggests a rich medical tradition rooted in careful observation. A healer may have recognized fever, wound, or digestive pain, while also addressing the patient's relation to community and cosmos. In this world, recovery was not merely physical. It was social and spiritual, involving the restoration of harmony between body, place, and unseen forces. Maya art offers another quiet doorway into that broader understanding of life. Painted ceramics, carved lintels, stucco reliefs, and murals preserved scenes of courtly ceremony, warfare, myth, and intimate exchange. Their colors, when preserved, can still feel remarkably alive: deep red, black, cream, blue, and earthy orange. Artists portrayed clothing folds, facial expression, and ceremonial objects with striking attention, often embedding names, titles, and verbal phrases in the images themselves. Pottery vessels were not just containers. Many were painted with hieroglyphic captions that identified their use, content, or owner, and some were created for feasting and gifting among elites. A drinking vessel might depict a mythological scene that unfolded as the liquid inside was consumed. Art and writing were therefore interlaced, each supporting the other, and both helping to create a courtly atmosphere in which beauty, memory, and status could be held together. Not all Maya writing was monumental or elite. Some of the most important evidence for everyday thought comes from smaller inscriptions, portable objects, and later manuscripts. The surviving codices, though few in number, reveal a deep interest in astronomy, divination, ritual sequence, and seasonal planning. Their pages contain tables of Venus cycles, eclipses, ceremonies, and deities, written with remarkable precision. The paper, made from bark and folded like a screen, would have been light to hold and easy to consult, though also vulnerable to damp, fire, and destruction. Most such books were lost after the Spanish arrival, a silence that still shapes modern understanding. Yet what remains suggests that Maya scholars maintained libraries of practical sacred knowledge, preserving calculations and interpretations across generations. The codices feel like conversations with time itself, carefully organized, patient, and attentive to repetition. In the broader social world, lineage and ancestry mattered deeply. Noble families traced legitimacy through descent, marriage alliances, and memorialization of predecessors. Ancestors were not remote abstractions. They were present through tombs, offerings, portraits, names, and ritual remembrance. Burial beneath houses or temples could place the dead close to the living, folding generations into a shared domestic and ceremonial space. Some tombs contained jade beads, shell ornaments, pottery, and pigment, suggesting that death was accompanied by acts of preparation and continuity. Elite tombs in particular could be elaborate, sometimes built within pyramids or beneath temple floors, turning architecture into an instrument of memory. The deceased ruler or noble was not simply gone. In a sense, they remained part of the building, the lineage, and the sacred order that the living continue to maintain. And through all of this, the Maya world remained multilingual and regionally varied. What we call the Maya today encompasses many communities across a wide geography and a long span of time, and their languages, styles, political structures, and local traditions were never fully uniform. Cities rose and declined at different moments, some thriving during the classic period, others becoming prominent later. Shared scripts, calendars, and religious concepts connected these societies, but local identity remained strong. This is one reason the ancient Maya are so compelling to historians. They were both interconnected and diverse, capable of building common intellectual traditions while preserving distinct places and voices. In the end, their civilization cannot be reduced to a single city, a single dynasty, or a single story. It is better understood as a vast woven fabric, made from many threads, moving gently through time, one pattern at a time. In the final centuries of Maya civilization, one of the most intimate and carefully preserved forms of knowledge was kept in the painted bark books known as codices. These were not the only books in Mesoamerica, but they were among the most fragile, and almost all were destroyed after the Spanish conquest. What survives now is only a handful, each one a narrow window into a much larger world of study. The Maya wrote in bark paper made from inner tree fibers, then folded the pages accordion style, creating books that could be opened on woven mats or held in the hands of priests and scribes. Their pages carried calendar tables, astronomical observations, ritual instructions, and names of deities tied to the cycles of time. The surviving codices suggest an intellectual culture that did not simply record events, but watched the sky with patience, comparing one cycle to another, looking for patterns in Venus, the moon, and the rhythm of the seasons. It is easy to imagine a quiet chamber lit by a small flame, with a scribe leaning over the pages, his brush moving carefully across the page. So much was lost, and yet the surviving books still feel alive with attention, as if the Maya were teaching time itself to breathe in measured cycles. That same attention to time appears in the Maya calendar system, which was not one calendar, but several working together. There was the 260-day sacred count, the 365-day solar year, and larger cycles that could stretch across generations. To modern readers, the system can seem bewildering, but to the Maya it was a finely tuned way of placing human life inside the larger movement of the cosmos. A person's birthday, a ritual, a king's accession, or a season of planting could all carry different layers of meaning depending on where they fell in these interwoven counts. The long count especially gave the Maya a way to record dates far beyond a single human lifetime, marking history in vast sweeps. Monumental inscriptions could announce not only what had happened, but when it happened in a cosmic sense, as though the event belonged to a much grander rhythm than the one felt by any individual. Some scholars have long noted that the calendar was also political, since rulers used it to connect their authority to divine order. Still, beyond politics, there is something deeply human in this system, a desire to make time itself understandable, countable, and calm, like beads slipped one by one through quiet fingers. As careful as they were with dates, the Maya were equally attentive to the landscape around them, especially in the ways they managed water. Much of the Maya world included seasonally dry regions, where rainfall could shift dramatically through the year. Cities and villages depended on reservoirs, canals, aguadas, terraces, and other water systems that helped store rain and guide it where needed. In places like Tikal, the grandeur of temples and palaces rested on a hidden infrastructure of practical engineering. Water was not merely a background resource, it shaped settlement patterns, agriculture, and the timing of daily life. During the rainy season, roofs, courtyards, and plazas could channel water into storage basins. In dry months, those reserves became precious. The Maya also altered the land itself, building terraces and raised fields in some regions to support crops and reduce erosion. This was not a single universal system, but a collection of local responses to local environments, each one adapted to the terrain. What stands out is the quiet sophistication of it all. The cities were not only ceremonial places. They were carefully sustained places where the movement of water had to be watched as closely as the movement of stars. And then there was maize, the crop at the center of Maya nourishment, identity, and story. Maize was more than a staple food. It was woven into origin beliefs and daily labor alike. The Maya understood their lives through the cycle of planting and harvesting, and maize filled not just stomachs but metaphors. In the Popol Vuh, one of the great texts of Kayich Maya tradition, humanity is closely associated with corn, and the creation stories reflect the idea that people were made from maize dough. This image has deep resonance because it links human existence to the cultivated landscape. To eat maize was to participate in a sacred cycle of growth, loss, and renewal. Farmers knew their fields by reading the soil, the clouds, the return of the rains, and the behavior of birds and insects. They planted, tended, and harvested with knowledge passed down through families and communities. Alongside maize, they grew beans, squash, chili, cacao, and many other crops, creating a varied and resilient food system. At dawn, when fields were cool and still, the work may have begun quietly, with the smell of damp earth and the soft rustle of leaves. In this world, agriculture was not simply production. It was a relationship, patiently renewed. The Maya also had a rich tradition of burial and ancestor veneration, and their tombs reveal a great deal about how they understood life after death. Some elites were buried beneath temple floors within pyramids or in carefully constructed chambers accompanied by jade, pottery, shell ornaments, and other offerings. These objects were not random valuables. They were part of a ritual language intended to guide or honor the dead. In many Maya communities, ancestors were not gone in a final sense. They remained present in memory, in ritual, and in the legitimacy of family and dynasty. A ruler could draw authority from descent lines that reached back to earlier generations, and tombs often became part of a sacred landscape of continuity. The dead were placed in a world of symbolism: red cinnabar, polished green jade, and vessels painted with scenes or glyphs that may have referenced rebirth, travel, or status. Archaeologists have found burials in caves, beneath houses, and in public ceremonial centers, suggesting that death was handled in many ways depending on region, period, and social rank. Yet beneath the variations lies a common thread. The Maya did not seem to imagine death as a simple disappearance. They treated it as a transformation, surrounded by care, memory, and the slow weight of ritual. That sense of transformation also appears in the Maya relationship with caves, which were often regarded as sacred openings into the earth. Caves could be places of water, darkness, emergence, and communication with powerful beings. In the broader Mesoamerican worldview, mountains and caves often formed a connected sacred geography, with caves acting as entrances to underworld spaces or sources of life-giving rain. Some Maya groups used caves for offerings, burials, and ceremonies, placing ceramics, incense, and other items in chambers that echoed with dripping water and the movements of bats. To enter a cave was to step into a different register of space, where light changed, sound deepened, and the body became acutely aware of humidity and stone. Archaeologists working in cave systems have found evidence of long and repeated use, sometimes spanning many centuries. The meanings of specific cave rituals are not always clear, and modern interpretation must move carefully, but the patterns are striking. Caves were not empty spaces to the Maya. They were alive with presence, memory, and perhaps the breath of the earth itself. The same kind of sacred presence could be found in the ball game, one of the most famous elements of ancient Maya life. The game was played in specially built courts that still survive in ruins across the Maya region, their long stone alleyways suggesting a setting both athletic and ceremonial. Though the exact rules varied over time and place, the ball game was more than sport. It had social, political, and religious dimensions. Rubber balls, heavy and resilient, were struck with hips, forearms, or other body parts depending on local tradition. The sound of play would have echoed against masonry walls, sharp and rhythmic. In art and inscriptions, the ball game is often linked to mythic narratives, conflict, sacrifice, and cosmic struggle. Some scenes show defeated players or supernatural spectators, while others present the game as a dramatized contest between forces of life and death. The ball game may also have served as a venue for diplomacy, rivalry, and community display, allowing elites to demonstrate skill, sponsorship, and authority. Not every game ended in sacrifice, and scholars continue to debate the balance between ritual symbolism and actual outcomes. Still, the courts themselves remain powerful spaces, built with intention and visibility, where physical movement could be made to carry cosmic meaning. The Maya were also master builders of cities that were often spread across forests rather than concentrated like modern urban centers. Their settlement patterns could be sprawling, with temples, palaces, courtyards, homes, roads, terraces, and agricultural spaces interwoven through the landscape. In places such as Karakol, Calakmul, and Kapan, the built environment could extend far beyond what an untrained eye might notice at first glance. What seemed at one time like isolated ruins are now understood as parts of dense and organized communities. Some structures were reserved for elites and ceremonial gatherings, while others housed ordinary families working in layered neighborhoods. The cities were shaped by local topography, political alliances, trade routes, and access to water and farmland. Causeways linked important parts of some urban centers, creating movement across plazas and through tree-lined corridors. At certain times of day, the city might have felt full of sound. Footsteps on plaster, vendors speaking, birds calling from the canopy, and the distant pounding of construction or craft work. Yet the Maya city was not a single fixed thing. It changed over time, expanded, contracted, and shifted with political fortunes. This flexible urbanism was one of its defining strengths, even if it can be difficult to map with modern expectations. Trade played a large part in connecting these cities and the people who lived among them. The Maya exchanged cacao, obsidian, jade, feathers, salt, shells, ceramics, textiles, and other goods across long distances. Some items traveled only regionally, while others moved far beyond local zones, tying together communities with different resources and expertise. Obsidian, with its sharp black sheen, came from volcanic sources, and